Transformational travel. Remember, we are continuing our quote of seek until you find. When you find, you will be troubled. That's the second part of this, and that's what we're going to discuss today. Now, despite the lovely image that you see here, a lovely garden or park area in Belgium, art and travel are not always initially positive. They can trouble us. When we embark on a journey, we leave what is familiar. We extend ourselves beyond our comfort zones, and we expose ourselves to what is new and strange, just as we do in viewing art. Now, if we have the proper attitude and disposition developed through self-knowledge, which we've discussed before, we will learn even more about ourselves through new experiences. Unfortunately, some of what we learn will trouble us. We already know that all growth and transformation require a period of discomfort. If we have first begun an inner journey, we will have a greater awareness of what needs to change in ourselves when we travel. What troubles us indeed will teach us. But if we are not self-aware, the differences we encounter in cultures and societies and even art will elicit prejudicial thoughts. What's wrong with this culture? These people, these artists. But if we have cultivated self-awareness, then we know that what is strange and new in art and travel may expose something within us that limits us, that we need to deal with. Our greatest flaw is a limited perspective, cultivated by limited experiences. So giving ourselves over to frequent journeys can help us overcome those limitations. I think someone last week may have quoted this during our Q&A period, but I thought it was worth repeating. Travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness, and many of our people need it sorely on these accounts. Broad, wholesome, charitable views of men and things cannot be acquired by vegetating in one little corner of the earth all one's lifetime. This is the vision of Saint Genevieve by the artist that we looked at last week, Alphonse Osbert. And his work was inspired by the ideas that we examined last week. Seek until you find. Saint Genevieve is the patron saint of Paris, whose visions helped save the city from Attila the Hun's attack in 451. The hazy tones of blue and green in this work evoke a sense of sacred mystery. This very work was exhibited in Paris in 1892 at the Salon Rose-Cross, organized by a character named Josephin Paladin. Josephin Paladin, on the left, was a writer, art critic, and a mystic. He revived Rosicrucianism, blending it with theosophical beliefs, and successfully recruited many of the symbolist artists. Now, what is Rosicrucianism? I think one of our community members, Michael Simpson, brought this up last week or mentioned it, and some of you had questions about it. Rosicrucianism began as a Christian secret society in Europe in the early 17th century, whose members claimed to have ancient and secret wisdom discovered by their founder, Christian Rosenkreuz. Now, many scholars now regard this character as a fiction, but it's his story that concerns us this morning. Christian Rosenkreuz was a seeker and traveled to the Middle East and North Africa in search of transformational wisdom. What he discovered, he believed, was a secret knowledge that would help redeem a European culture corrupted by greed, materialism, prejudices of all kinds, and superstitions. Now, Paladin and the symbolist artists in turn-of-the-century Paris believed the time had arrived to call society forth to seek this esoteric wisdom. Paladin organized exhibits from 1892 to 1897, as you see one of the posters there on the right, using symbolist art as his sermons and the artists as his evangelists. Their works are infused with a call to seek. And he stated the goals of his annual salons. The salon wishes to ruin realism, reform Latin taste, and create a school of idealist art. So it's this idealism these symbolists felt could elevate us spiritually that we're going to examine this morning. The artist we will focus on today is Belgian painter and poet Jean Delville, who believed in Paladin's ideas. This painting you see is called The Death of Orpheus, painted in 1893. For Paladin and the symbolists, Orpheus is the ancestor of all poets and musicians who reveal eternal truths through their art. Now, artists across Europe in the late 19th century turned their imaginations inward. The ancient Greek myth of the poet Orpheus, portrayed here in this rhapsodic blue and gold, became a powerful icon of the symbolist movement, representing the artist as a kind of seer and wise one. Here we see him meet his tragic fate of decapitation, his head floating on his lyre down a river. According to legend, Orpheus composed and played music so beautiful and ethereal, he became irresistible to both women and men. Even the gods who heard him sing and play swooned. But there was only one love for Orpheus, and that was Eurydice. After she died from a snake bite, Orpheus entered the underworld to try to rescue his lover from death. He was unable to bring her back, and the Maenads, those frenzied followers of Dionysus, tore him to pieces in a Bacchic orgy because Orpheus preferred the worship of the rival god Apollo. It's no wonder Apollo happened to be Orpheus's father. As you can tell, artists have always identified with the romantically tragic. This particular work is titled Parsifal, who was the pure knight of King Arthur's court, who joins the quest for the Holy Grail. He too is a seeker who travels to find what is sacred. Parsifal, as depicted in this work, possesses Christ-like qualities conveyed through the crown of the sun that you see at the top and the flaming heart. He is otherworldly. He is an ideal with a capital I. The artist, in order to evolve, will have to extend the study of nature to the great laws of cosmic ideas. That knowledge will urge him to penetrate the mystery and the hidden meaning in the form of the visible word. The object of art, then, is to cause us to perceive the essential reality of things. By essential reality of things, Delville is telling us that this material world is not all that there is, that there exists a very real spiritual realm. In fact, this spiritual realm is more real than the one that we see with our eyes and ears and take in with all of our senses. Now notice the phrase, the form of the visible word, and in parentheses you see logos. Logos is the eternal rational principle which created all things. And most of us are familiar with that word logos by the first chapter in the Gospel of John. In the beginning was the Word, the Logos. What he's claiming is that art can make visible the form of this Logos through the power of symbols. He goes on to say, the truth that modern critics and even the majority of artists fail to understand is that art is the incarnation of the idea, the Word, under the forms of nature. Now, this is for all of you listening who are artists. Wow, what a lofty calling you have to live up to. This is called the Wheel of the World. Here we have a tall, grim-looking figure pointing downward with one hand and holding a skull in the other. He's reminding us of our earthly destiny, death. A mass of bodies goes round and round, the nature of material existence. We strive and strive for satisfaction in this world, but it is unable to provide it. We are now at a decision point. Do we take the red pill and discover a disturbing but enlightening truth, or the blue pill and remain in blissful ignorance, continuing to go round and round on the wheel? If we do indeed jump off the wheel in a leap of faith, we enter into the way of the seeker, the mystic. Art and travel are the sacred liturgy and rituals of the seeker. For now we see through a mirror darkly, but art and travel make us aware of this limitation and help us have eyes to see and ears to hear. Art and travel can broaden our minds, our hearts, our souls. This brilliant work is called The Angel of Splendors, done in 1894. And here we see a young man on the right longing to fly with this ethereal angel. And yet there's something troubling about it. His eyes are glazed with bliss. Yet his body is held down. The earth and all that fascinates us clings to him. A very menacing looking toad is part of what clings to him, but my son finds them fascinating, so maybe you do too. But for the rest of us, we have these roses and berries and golden butterflies as well. What is apparently good or fascinating in this world can distract us from what is best. In this case, union with the absolute, the divine. Now you might be asking yourself, aren't we supposed to enjoy the pleasures of earth? All that is beautiful and lovely for the senses? Well, yes, we are. And no, we are not. Here, art reveals a both and situation of our existence. We are stuck in this duality. We crave what is transcendent, yet we are enticed and mesmerized by the material as well. Salvation for the soul means finding a way to overcome this duality, or at least come to peace with it. Now, I'm a fan of charcoal drawings, so I included this work. It's called The Allegory of Hell. This charcoal work also has an angel of splendors. And from an initial observation, it looks as if a glorious angel of light has arrived to bless these people, or more specifically, this noble-looking man in the foreground. But this angel of light is so glorious and otherworldly that it overwhelms the scene, and the people below seem bewildered and some terrified. It is titled Allegory of Hell. So perhaps the presence of angels sometimes is not so wonderful. Maybe their presence means we should be afraid. If an angel is a symbol of a higher realm, their presence on earth may mean the experience of truths that may disturb us deeply. Instead of experiencing wonder, awe, the sublime, we may experience how little and bound we are, even how corrupt we are, how mortal we are. What story is this work really telling us? Look at these three figures in the foreground. We have this royal-looking figure, clearly of Near Eastern origin, the way he is dressed, and he's lying prostrate with his eyes closed. He appears to be in deep contemplation. He actually has sort of a look of peace and calm about him. But the two other figures behind him seem to be grieving. Perhaps the man is not in deep contemplation after all. In this work, Delville reminds us of our destiny. For this brilliant, luminous angel is in fact Azrael, the angel of death. No matter what we accumulate, what status we achieve in this world, we all face the same fate. How shall we then live? What shall we live for? This massive painting, it's about, I think, 20 feet in length, is titled The School of Plato and was first exhibited at the 1898 Salon d'Art Idéaliste in Brussels. When I first saw this painting at the Musée d'Orsay in Paris, it was initially disorienting to me. You might even say it disturbed me on two fronts. First, despite the title, The School of Plato, it is clearly referencing Jesus and the 12 apostles. Yet it is also meant to depict Plato. By making Plato a mirror of Jesus, Delville is claiming that much of the spirit of Christianity, even some of its teachings, grew out of Plato's teaching. In fact, Plato was a deeply spiritual teacher. But the Academy during the Belle Époque period, when this was painted, had come under the sway of materialism, as it is today. Spirituality was off limits in academia because science can't address it. So the philosophy of Plato had to be discussed as abstract ideas rather than spiritual ideals. Plato has clearly said that the duty of the soul is to conceive the universal. Delville believed then that the mission of art was to represent the great and eternal ideas. In that way, art would elevate the mind and soul of a person, at least for a time, and in doing so, make clear that what is essential while living in this material world is a contemplation of spiritual realities, spiritual ideals. Now, what were the spiritual ideals Delville was addressing in this work? Look at the posture of the men. This is also what disoriented me when I first saw this. Their femininity is surprising, even a bit shocking. At the time, I had not seen much art where men were displayed in this cross-gendered way. Leonardo da Vinci has a few paintings like this. But these figures, I didn't realize then, are not meant to represent people in the material world. They symbolize the restoration of male and female energies into androgynous beings, who themselves are symbols of the spiritual ideal in the beginning, before Eve was taken from Adam. Let me explain this a little bit. Rosicrucians and other esoteric and mystic seekers believed this split between the original man and woman was the true fall, not eating the forbidden fruit. We began our spiritual existence in their eyes as an undivided self, like our androgynous creator. But when we fell into material existence, we became a divided self, male or female, and thus beginning the war of the sexes. It is by the nude alone that the artist can express the essential character of life, the impersonal ideas, universal beliefs, and the general sentiments of mankind. In it, we even observe the clearly defined tendency of harmony, style, and proportion to meet through the constant study and aesthetic observation of nature in an ideal type. What he's saying is the nudity in the painting also has a spiritual function to present us with the harmony and perfection of form and remind us of higher ideals. Let's look again at this close-up of these effeminate characters. Said French philosopher, poet, and novelist Edward Charest, who was also a friend of many of the symbolists, quote, "The perfect fusion of masculine and feminine constitutes the very essence and mystery of divinity," unquote. Now, how many of us, practically speaking, think of the divine as a fusion of masculine and feminine? Practically speaking, say when we're praying. Our split into separate genders for mystics like Paladin and Delville represents our separation from divinity. Our work as seekers on the journey of life is to reunite as best we are able with Source, the Absolute, who includes both masculine and feminine energies. Now, you see that white peacock behind the men? I feel like I should mention this. The peacock was an early Christian symbol of resurrection and immortality. And I believe in this context also represents the eternal and pure ideals that Plato and Jesus spoke about. Let's go back to the full image. Do you see the wisteria tree behind Plato? Wisteria is traditionally a symbol of long life and immortality. And the wisteria flowering vines also produce a vast number of flowers, signifying our own expanding consciousness. The exaltation of the ideal thought of Plato, the ideal beauty of the figures, the peacock, and wisteria are meant to lift us spiritually. But they will only lift us if we let go of our literalism and see it symbolically. Seek the ideal and the beautiful, and you will find it, which is why I went to the Musée d'Orsay that day. But when you find it, you will be troubled, which I certainly was at first, because I was stuck at the time in a mindset of duality. Male and female is separate, until I came to understand the spiritual ideal the students of Plato truly represented. Some of you may remember seeing this image in one of my previous presentations. This is called the love of souls. Love between two people has the potential to overcome duality when it is infused with the divine spirit, which elevates mere romantic love, which is bound in the duality of male and female, to a higher transcendent energy. However, we know that romantic love rarely overcomes its dualistic nature with its emphasis on the differences between male and female, both physically and archetypically speaking. Delville wants us to see that when male and female energies are blended in a relationship, something deeply spiritual and transcendent is indeed possible. You see, our inner journey is intertwined with the outer journey. Art and travel are for the purpose of elevating us spiritually, enlightening our souls. If we have not become self-aware, realized our contingencies, our limitations of perspective and experiences and knowledge, we will not get the most out of our outward journeys. The self-realization of our limitations can create an attitude of openness, curiosity, a desire to fill in the gaps of our character and seek out transcendent experiences that can transform. Now, those of you who are scientists, I apologize for this quote. Art is more divine than science. Science makes discoveries. Art creates. Astronomy, which numbers the stars, cannot add an atom to the universe. A universe by a poet can be evolved from an atom. This is called the School of Silence. Here we see three women mystics, their eyes seeking something in the beyond, both inner and outward. Inner and outward journeys can indeed bring us to a moment of spiritual decision, which will at first trouble us. Do we decide to seek after something greater than ourselves, something sacred that is the true source of our being? Do we let go of attachments in the physical world, which bring us brief comfort if they prevent us from living for our noble cause? Do we sacrifice some other ambitions in order to pursue the great mystery, which relentlessly tugs at our hearts and minds? This call to seek is indeed troubling because it usually means giving up something, a good thing, in order to have something better. And that's not always an easy decision. I told you a story last week about my meeting a disillusioned rabbinical school student when I was in Israel on a school trip myself. He was thinking about traveling to India to explore Buddhism or Hinduism, or simply learn about the contemplative life. When we had finished our conversation on the pros and cons of religious faith, he told me that I would make a good teacher, kind of felt validated by that. But the strange thing was this. Even though I had tried to make him see the merits of continuing in rabbinical school, I felt after he had parted that maybe the best thing for him spiritually would be to continue traveling the globe as a seeker. In the days ahead, you will either be a mystic or nothing at all. Ronner was speaking to the reality in the 20th century that traditional religion and conventional spiritual paths were not feeding souls. They were not offering a profound experience of something beyond. They were merely talking about the beyond. Judging by the increased secularization of the West, at least, perhaps Ronner was right. So I ask, what are you? A mystic? Nothing at all? Or something in between? If you are nothing at all, or something in between, have you found this path to be a truly satisfying way to live? The works of Jean Delville invite us to consider the alternative way of the seeker, the mystic. No matter what you decide, what role do you think art and travel could play in helping you along the journey toward experiencing a little more of the sublime?